Good evening, everybody that's watching us from all over the world. We are learning tonight in the merit of the thousands of wounded Jews in the land of Israel and in the honor, the spiritual protection of the 300,000 Israeli reservists, plus, of course, all the regular soldiers. I don't know how many soldiers are on active duty besides the 300,000, but merit of Zachariah Frisch that we heard from, who was a Coral Springs boy who's currently on active duty. So our learning tonight, I'm frozen. Our learning tonight should be in the merit of all of those beautiful, brave, courageous souls and all of the people of Israel. So that's why we didn't cancel the class. Although I must admit I had a very hard time focusing today. So you can't stop watching the news. But let's learn in their merit and in the memory of Yitzchak Tzvi ben Yosef. Tonight we're going to be starting a 3-part series called the Garden of Eden series. And we will be talking about Adam. So we're not going to be talking about his counterpart, Eve. We're talking just about man, although everything tonight is as applicable to woman as man. When I talk about the creation of man tonight, what I is of human beings. Because next we'll talk about why humanity was created with this dual male-female synergy or dichotomy, maybe is a better word. So the question is, why would God make man? In fact, when God wanted to make man, the angels resisted God doing this. The angels resisted God making man, and there's a very famous that says that God came to consult with the angels. So should we make man? And loving kindness said, well, first all the angels were arguing. Some say created, some say not. So God turned to the attribute of chesed, to the attribute of kindness. And kindness said, create man, because man will do kind things. Then came truth and said, don't create man, because man will be full of lies. Yeah, I wouldn't use that word, but yes, that's another word used to describe the lack of truth that many human beings exemplify on a constant basis. Then he turned to the attribute of justice, and justice said, create man, because humanity will do justice. And he turned to peace, and peace said, don't create man, because man's not going to be very peaceful. In case what's going on in Gaza right now, not all of humanity is so peaceful. So what God do, says the Medrash? He took the attribute of truth and he threw it to the ground.
And truth said,
don't create man, because man will be full of lack of truth. Yeah. I'm on camera, so you can say what you want to say, I'll say what I say. But good evening, everyone watching from all over the world. I can't create truth that don't create man. They're not going to be so truthful. And God took the attribute of truth, he chucked it down, and God decided, despite the advice of many of the angels, decided to create regardless. The obvious question is why? And really, we don't need a story about angels to understand the danger of creating man. I mean, just look around, forget about in Israel. I mean, we all have plenty of people in our own lives that we know that are full of, they're full of it. And they don't do so much kindness, and they're very selfish. So creating man is highly risky. It maybe was not the best experiment that God did. God, after all, is perfect. God knows everything. God, I'm sure, knew what kind of, we would get into, and how things would turn out, and what would hit the fan, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to have to address this burning question. Why would a smart God, I'm not going to say make a mistake, but why would he make us? Make us. But before we get under the question of why, let's first address the what. It was a joke. It's a pretty bad joke. Yeah. There are many jokes about God creating man, by the way. But you know my favorite joke. Joke is that I've said it many times, but this young boy comes home from school and he's asking his father where they come from. So he says, what do you mean? We evolved. There used to be apes. And the apes, there were different. Over time, the apes evolved and got better and better till eventually became human beings. Comes to his mother. His mother says, how we created? God formed man. We're going to read in the Bible in a minute. God formed man from the clay of the earth, and he breathed into the nostrils the breath of life. So he says to his mother, I'm confused. Dad said we come from monkeys, and you're saying we come from God. So she says to her son, he's talking about his side of the family. I'm talking about my side of the family. Because you never heard me say that. That's a good one. Okay. So let's get first to the biblical account of God creating man. Let's just first understand how God created man, just the details of creation of man, and then we'll go back to this burning question of what was he thinking? Why would he do that? Okay. So if you turn, we give out the pages, right? Well, I didn't open up the text here 1 second. So we're going to go to the beginning of Genesis. Well, chapter 2. Chapter 1 is about creation of the rest of the world in 6 days. And I must tell you, when God finished creating the world in 6 days, it was pretty perfect. The world was pretty perfect. You know, all these beautiful animals, all the butterflies, and everything was beautiful. And then God decides, let me share my screen, those that are watching on my Facebook page. 1 second. So, verse number 6 of chapter 2. A mist ascended from the earth and watered the entire surface of the ground. So basically, it's like you're making a cake. You're making clay. You have flour. You need to mix in water to make it into texture. So you had the earth, the dust. God now hadn't rained. We're going to read later. Hadn't rained yet. So the earth was very, very dry. So God made a mist to come up to make the earth moist, like a clay. If you ever heard the expression that someone is like lying there like a lump of clay, this is where it comes from. And then says verse number 7, the Lord God formed man of dust from the ground. So God has made a lump of clay. He literally shaped the entire image of man. Before I go to the second half of the verse, God made the facial features. He made the head. He made the torso. He made the arms. He made the fingers. Every single detail of our physical body was, so to say, hand-formed by God himself. And I'm not going to get into it now, but I'll do a little bit of a sponsored announcement, a little paid advertisement for our upcoming World of Kabbalah course. So we're starting in a few weeks, October 24th. Every single aspect of man's body is reflective of the spiritual hierarchy. So each of our body parts, so right arm is Chesed, the left arm is Gvura, our torso is Tiferes, our right and left thighs is Netzach and Hod, and our place of reproductive organ is Yisod, and our mouth is Malchus, and there's a lot more, and we will be talking about that, God willing, in our Kabbalah class. Anyway, God makes the body. And the Talmud tells us something fascinating. God collected earth from all over the world in order to make this body. So God took earth from every part of the world, and then the torso, the main trunk of the person, was made with the earth from Babylonia, which is where the majority of Jews lived in the times of the Talmud. And then the head of man was made with earth from Israel. And he collected all of this earth onto Mount Moriah. Mount Moriah is where the Temple Mount, our Mount, I should add, is. And there is where he then, as we'll read, he breathed into his nostrils the soul of life and made him alive. Why did God collect earth from all over the world? To be well-rounded. Very good. Pun intended, I guess. God wanted, we know, the Torah tells us that God told man, from earth you are, and to earth you shall return. And the importance of a burial in Jewish philosophy, Jewish worldview is critical. Wherever a person will be buried, that is where they came from. So if a person lives in Florida, and they're buried right here in Florida, they might say, well, my body came from the earth of Israel. Now I'm being buried in the earth of Florida. God collected earth from all over the world. So a little bit of the earth of Florida was collected and was used in one part of the creation of the body of man. So wherever in the world a person is buried, they're being laid to rest in the place from where their body came. Okay? It's a very important idea to remember this. Our body comes from where it comes from. And then afterwards, after God had formed this body of man from the dust of earth, verse number 7 continues and says, he breathed into his nostrils the soul of life, and man became a living soul. Now, here is something also extremely important to explain. Every other creature that was created as a living being in one shot. So earlier in the 6 days of creation, when God wanted to make the beautiful tigers or zebras or lions or whatever it was, or the fish or the birds, God spoke and God said, let the earth teem forth with crawling creatures, or let the earth produce animals. And guess what? Immediately living creatures came to being. The body and soul of the animals was created simultaneously. They weren't two different entities that were then merged and forced to coexist as one. So every animal has a life force, a soul, but it's not a soul like we have a soul that was put into our bodies. The soul of an animal is the life. It's the vitality, the growth of the animal, but it's a part of its body. The human being is unique. The human being, as the Torah tells us explicitly, it's not some interpretations. You see it right here in the text. First was a body. And then there was another entity called the soul that was breathed into the nostrils of man. And this is the soul of person. And when the soul is inside the body, now man becomes a nefesh chaya, a living soul. Yes, question.
So is that the godly soul or is it the animal soul? And do all human beings have a godly and an animal soul?
All human beings, no. So you're going into a very complicated question. I don't even know 100% have. Let's leave your question on the side because I'm not even 100% sure about animal soul or godly soul at this point. What was breathed in? I'd have to. Let's leave it on the side. Yeah, no. The soul, I believe, I'm not 100% sure. I believe that it's one soul with two aspects, but I'm not sure. Let's leave it on the side. Not well, they don't. They don't. But you're going to a whole other conversation that's going to derail us. So let's just stay on track. Correct. No, but I don't want to get distracted. We already started very late. So let's stay on focus. So he breathed into his soul, living soul. How, because of this dichotomy, because of the fact that we have a body, a physical entity, and we have a soul inside us, which is a spiritual entity, the two are at odds one with the other, and they struggle with each other. And in fact, you see this dichotomy, this soul called the God's soul, animal soul, the very word that God uses to describe the creation of man. So if you pay very careful attention to the opening Hebrew word of verse number 7, the opening Hebrew word of verse number 7 is Vayitzer. You see that word? And the Lord formed. Man is not one creation. Man is actually two creations. A creation for this world and a creation for the time to come, for the resurrection of the dead. Meaning there's this dichotomy within us. There's our physical existence, and then there's the spiritual part of us that lives forever. But in connection with the animals who do not stand in judgment, two yuds are not written, but rather it says vayitze with one yud. Same word, same meaning, but the Hebrew word for the creation of animals is spelled vav yud tzadik, and the same word when written regarding man is spelled with two yuds, vav yud tzadik. Do you see that in the text? Marsha's looking. If you see the Hebrew in the Rashi quotes, you have man is two yuds, and the animal is spelled only one yud over there. Well, Rashi's teaching us now. Okay? So this is a very, very important idea. And it explains a lot of our struggle, a lot of our desire for physical pleasure, enjoyment, indulgences, and our desire for spiritual, meaningful experiences. Human beings want to have meaningful spiritual experiences. Okay. So this is the creation of man. And by the way, this also fits in with a very important Jewish philosophy on the fact that when the person dies, we know they don't die, only their body dies. Because who is a person really? Just a physical body of flesh and blood and bones and sinews? No. We are our feelings, our personality, our love, our character. What defines you is not your physical vessel, although that's the way you look, but that's not who you really are. You're whatever your personalities, and you're whatever your personalities, and you're whatever your style, personality, character is. So when a person dies, the body is laid to rest, but the soul continues to live. And again, this is something I could talk about for a long time. It could be a class of its own. I just want to point it out because here's the text where we see these ideas. Okay. Then Rashi continues to tell us that he's made from dust from the entire earth, from all four directions. And then the next Rashi, let me just share my screen one more time. The next Rashi tells us that not only was man made from earth, from all four corners of the world, but in addition, it says that God blew, he breathed into his nostrils. He made him of earthly matter and of heavenly matter. The body is made from the earth of this, the soil of the earth, and the soul is made from heavenly matter. From what? From the breath of God. And in fact, and Chassidus explains that when it talks about God blowing into his nostrils, so the English translation says he breathed into his nostrils. But if you know Hebrew, vayipach means to blow. What's the difference between speaking? All of the rest of creation was spoken into existence. God spoke and there were animals. How did God make man? He didn't speak. He made his body in a physical manner, physical, inanimate, literally an inanimate dead body. And then he breathed into his nostrils. He blew into his nostrils. When you blow, where do you blow from? Your kishkas. Can't see on the screen, but from right deep within you. When we talk, we can talk for a long time. And the people that can talk for many, many hours. Many hours. No break needed whatsoever. They can just go. Right? Bunny rabbits, and just leave them and come back in the morning, they'll still be talking. They can talk a long time. But to blow, try blowing a tuba, or I'm saying a trumpet. A shofar. Exactly. How long can you blow a tkiya gadol on a shofar for? After not that long, you start running out of steam. So when you blow, it's coming from deep within you. It's much more internal. All of creation was spoken by God. It came from a more external level of God's existence. The creation of the soul of man comes from deep within God, a place that has to be blown out of God. It has to be from deep within him. Yeah, imagine that when you blow. If you ever go to, get music lessons or whatever, voice lessons, you got to project from deep within yourself. That's how God created the soul of man. Okay, so here we have the creation of man, unique from all other creations. We are created as a body with inside it, a dead, inanimate body with a holy, heavenly piece of God blown inside us. We are created in the image. I didn't bring those verses because I don't want to get too distracted. We're standing up. All of the creatures, this is part of being in the image of God. All of the creatures were created as one entity, a living body. The soul and the body is intertwined as one. So there's just one level of existence. So the body and the soul are the same. So therefore the body is flat. The head and the tush and the reproductive organs, it's all the same. On the human being, the head is on top, the heart is below the head, the reproductive part of us, our digestive system is below that. There's meant to be a hierarchy of self-control, self-awareness, self-moderation, which we'll talk about, God willing, in the third class on temptation for sin. Okay? Got it. Now, my friends, we come back to the real question.
Did you just say that they were created standing up?
No, we were laying down, but we were created the way that we were meant to walk standing up. We were lying down, but then we stood up on 2 feet. All other creations were meant to walk on 4 feet. There's no hierarchy in animals. Animals are not expected to have self-control where the brain controls the heart, or the heart controls the bodily functions, or controls the other parts of our body that get excited and get the. Humans are expected to have that level of self-control. Ideas in Chassidus, the brain controls the heart. I'm not going there, just pointing out these beautiful ideas. What we want to spend the next half hour talking about is the real question. If God had made such a beautiful world, and he had perfect creatures, and he had the angels, You have beautiful angels, right? The angels were created on the second day of creation. And angels don't mess up, and angels don't make trouble, and angels don't make wars. So why would God decide to make human beings? Male, female, Jew, non-Jew, humans. All those created in the image of God. So God gives us a very clear clue just a few verses later. So let's share our books, our screens again. I'm now going to verse 15 of chapter 2. So we're still in chapter 2 of creation, but now we're just a few verses later. It says the Torah in verse 15, and the Lord, God, took the man, placed him in the Garden of Eden. Why did he place him in the Garden of Eden? Torah, 2 words. God placed man in the Garden of Avda Ulashamra, to work it and to guard it. These are the texts of the Torah. We often think, what was Adam and Eve doing in the Garden of Eden? They were frolicking, right? They were frolicking in paradise. That's the common misconception. We do. We were created to be like creatures that frolic. So what do birds and animals and cows? They frolic, right? They eat cows, they eat the grass, and then they munch, they eat some grass, might take a little nap in the sun, more grass, have a few babies, eat some more grass, and they go to sleep. You know what I'm saying? That's life in the day of a cat. There's not much intellectual stimulation. There's not much of anything. And so we imagine this completely inaccurate and baseless idea. It's not from the Torah, that's for sure not. That when God created man, he put him in the Garden of Eden in order to frolic in the garden, to have a party, enjoy paradise. But that's not what the Torah says. God make man. Why did he make a Garden of Eden? Why did he make a paradise? For us to work this paradise, for us to improve it, for us to better it, and for us to guard it. Now, what does that mean? What are we guarding paradise from? What do we go like? First of all, what do we? Paradise is perfect. The Torah before verse 15, this beautiful the garden was. Every tree you can imagine was in. Every delicacy you can think was in the Garden of Eden. So what is working in the garden? Protecting in the garden. Talmud asks this question. You know, it's like what is man guarding from? There were no robbers back then, were there? I don't think so.
Maybe from themselves.
Guarding it from themselves. So the Talmud said, we are, well?
Didn't God create it so that man would have to pray to God for?
We're going to get there in a second. Hold that thought for like literally only a minute. So the Gemara says, when God told man he would have to work in the garden, Zu mitzvahs aseh. These are the positive commandments given to man. And when God said guard it, was the negative commandments. Now, what positive mitzvah did God have? What positive mitzvah did Adam have in the garden? Did he have the mitzvah of tefillin and of Simchas Torah and all that? The mitzvah he had was to stay in the garden. God the garden, and he had a mitzvah to stay in the garden. And God said to guard the garden was a low side, not to leave the garden. And then in the first God not to eat from the forbidden fruit of the tree of knowledge, which again we'll talk about in lesson 3. Why would God create a tree that he can't eat from? Why would God create temptation and want us to be tempted to sin? If you don't want us to sin, then don't make the temptation in the first place. That we'll be talking about in, God willing, in 2 weeks from now. But the point is, God created man to work and to protect the integrity of the garden, but not violating the sanctity of the garden by leaving the garden. So it was clear, the Torah was telling us, the purpose of man's existence is not to frolic in the garden. It's not to run around in our birthday suits, like an animal, like a bull, you know, like a cow just munching on food all day. It's reminded of a joke about these I'll say the joke, why not? These two friends, that they make a pact to each other, vow to each other, that when one of them dies, the other one will come and tell the friend what life is like in the afterworld. So anyway, sure enough, one of them dies, and 2 weeks later, his friend comes to him and he says to him, "So I'm coming back to do what I told you. I passed away, I came to be judged, and my life is amazing. I sit out in the pastures all day. The sun rises in the morning, and I just lay in the suntan, and I eat to my heart's content. There's no shortage of food ever. I eat until my belly is totally stuffed. Then I take a little nap in the garden, in the sun. Then I eat more until I'm stuffed again. Then I have some intimacy with as many girls as I want. And then I eat some more. I go to sleep, and I do the whole thing over." Just, wow. This is what paradise is like? And his friend says to him, "Paradise? I didn't say I'm in paradise. I was reincarnated as a bull in Montana." Reincarnated as a bull. So man wasn't created to be a bull in Montana. We were created to be people. In fact, Marsha made a very good point. If you go back just a few verses earlier, still in chapter 2, go to verse number 5, when God is talking about this Garden of Eden, what does the verse say? "Although God had made a garden, now no tree of the field was on the earth, neither did any herb of the field yet grow, because the Lord had not rained upon the earth." Why did God not bring rain upon the earth? Says the verse, because there was no man to work the soil.
Wait, so was it a beautiful, lush thing when man was?
You're confused. Good. It's good to be confused. The verse says that after God made the Garden of Eden, everything was right below the surface of the ground. Nothing had actually come out yet. Why? God wanted rain to grow. And why did there was no man who would appreciate the rain and ask for the rain and pray for the rain. So God wanted to wait for there to be a man before God being with the beauty of the Garden of Eden. Which means, guys, that the whole beauty of the Garden of Eden wasn't that God made a beautiful garden. And then God said, "You know what? Let me make a man to frolic in the garden." It's the other way around. God said, "I'm going to make potential for a beautiful garden, but I'm not going to allow it to become beautiful. I'm not going to bring rain upon the earth until there's a man to appreciate and develop and cultivate."
Adam was created, and he looked around, it was like nothing.
Correct. God was waiting for Adam to pray for rain and to appreciate the beauty of the garden, which almost means,
how did Adam know what to pray for if he never seen rain before?
we pray that God should make it work. He prayed that God should, I don't know, he prayed to God. He appreciated the beauty of what God did. Okay? The point is, God almost, it seems like from what we just said, that God needs man to make the world. That's what it seems to be implying. Without a man, then creation is not finished. So did God make a beautiful world and put man into the world? Or is a man the whole purpose of creation? And without man, there's no creation. You understand what I'm asking? It seems from what we've just explained that the only way that there could be a Garden of Eden is if there's man to work and to protect the garden. It's the exact opposite of what most people believe about the Garden of Eden. There was a beautiful paradise, and then God put man into this beautiful paradise to enjoy life in his birthday suit, him and his wife. And as they sinned, they were evicted from the garden. But that's not what the Torah says. They were given a mission of work. And the garden only existed for them, to work it, to protect it, to cultivate it. That was their divine mission. So this really brings us to a fascinating question. Why would God need man to finish his purpose in creation? Okay. You're on the right track. Around for a few years. I mean, he's saying the right thing. But let me explain the question. Why would God, who is perfect, make himself dependent on human beings, us, who are quite fallible, quite open to disasters and glitches and errors in the system, and make his creation and the beauty and the integrity of his Garden of Eden dependent upon our ability to actually correct, work the garden, and the way God wants us to. So Marsh is saying correctly, God wanted a partner, but it's more than just a partner. God was lonely. Who just said that? Michelle. God was lonely.
Because I wanted a child and I was lonely without my children. So I got one and one so bad.
Saying is 100% correct, but just about a husband, not about children, but the same idea.
It wasn't about
I understand what you're saying. But it says, but what you're saying is exactly what it says. Exactly what it says. What Michelle just said is exactly what it says about God. God was lonely. In fact, the reason we get lonely, the reason why we have this need to get married and find companionship and find love in a relationship is it's rooted in God's desire to find love and be in a relationship. And until God found love, so to say, now I know what I'm saying in a second, until God found love, God was indeed Yachid Ba'olamai. God was indeed unique in the universe. There was absolutely nothing else in the universe that existed that came close to being in some level of companionship or a relationship with God. So although God was perfect, although God had absolutely perfect angels who do everything God told them to do, having angels that do whatever you tell them is not a relationship. I'll give you an example. Imagine you would program a computer system to love you. You can create a robot. I mean, today it's not time to say, probably have it already. You create some doll, and you create the doll to have whatever voice you want and whatever looks you want. And you tell the doll all the things you love to hear being said to yourself. All of your insecurities tell the doll, say you so this, you so that. And the doll tells you everything you want to hear. Is that love? Is the robot or the doll loving you? No. All the doll is doing is amplifying your own vision of your own self-love. This robot is not actually loving you. It's just telling you back what you wanted to hear. So it's you talking to yourself via a robot or via a doll or via whatever else it is. That's not real love. Love can only exist when someone chooses you. When someone who didn't have to love you, who didn't have to have a relationship with you, who didn't have to care about you, chooses to care about you. That is a definition of love, right? So God said correctly, was lonely. And God decided, I want to have a relationship. I want to have a relationship. And because God wanted a relationship, God said the only way I can create a relationship is if I create a world is automatically, inherently found over there. I'm not inherently already found over there. If I exist automatically there, I'm not being found. And if I'm not being found, it's not a relationship. So what did God do? God made one world that was a little more concealed. The godliness of that world was a little bit more concealed than the world above it. And then God made an even lower world. And in that world, the godliness there was even a little bit more concealed than the world before. And then God made another world in which God was even more concealed. And then another which God was even more concealed and more concealed and more concealed through many different chains of descent called the chains of devolution, as we're going to be discussing in our upcoming Kabbalah series, until eventually God made a world that was so concealed, so dark, that God was not visible at all in that world. A world completely devoid of any obvious signs of God whatsoever. You know why God wanted that? Says the Medrash. Let's read an amazing fundamental Medrash. The Medrash tells us, the Medrash Tanchuma, So says Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachman, at the time that the Holy One, blessed be He, created the world, He did so because His ultimate purpose of creation of all worlds, upper and lower, is that He desired a home for Himself in the lowest of all worlds. In the Hebrew, He wanted a dira b'tachtonim. He wanted a dwelling in the lowest of all worlds, because only in the lowest of all worlds could you have a place where God is not inherently already found there. Now, there's a problem with what I'm saying. Before I go, does it make sense what I'm saying? Understand the concept? God wants a relationship. So what does God do? God makes a world in which He's concealed to create a home. What's a home? Where you're found, where you really exist. So, does God need us or does God not need us?
He does. Oh, yeah.
He does need us. What's the problem with saying that God needs us?
That means he's not in.
That means He's not perfect.
Right.
If you say that God needs something, you've just limited God and made Him a needy creature who's not perfect and all-encompassing and all-powerful and all-self-sufficient.
And that's how I felt when you said he was lonely too.
That's how you felt. When I said God was lonely, I was describing a needy entity.
Why can't he be both?
Why can't if you need something, then you're not perfect?
If we change the word to want, does it do the same?
Oh, Robert's a smart man. So notice, and it didn't say in the Medrash that God needed a place below. God desired. The Hebrew word was nisav. A desire. Ta'avot pleasures, desires. The word of the Medrash we just quoted it 1 second ago, the Hebrew was there. Hashem desired a dwelling below. You're right. If Hashem would need below, if He would need to be married, then He would be imperfect without us. God didn't need us. But you know what? God was missing one thing in the world. He was missing a relationship. So God decided to allow His desire to make Him want to need a relationship. He didn't inherently need it. He's perfect. But He decided, I want to make myself vulnerable. Because when you need something, you're vulnerable. If you need something from me, now you're vulnerable to me. I have some level of control over you, right? I have something that you need. So you have to pay me, you have to bribe me, you have to beg me, whatever you have to do to get what you need from me. So if we say that God needs us, guess what? Then God's vulnerable. That means that God is at our mercy. So you can't say God needs us, because then God will be vulnerable. But God decided, I want to be vulnerable. God said, I want to put myself into a situation where I am at the mercy of these fallible people that mess up. Do you understand how crazy that is?
Right, so
He chose. He wanted to be vulnerable.
That's kind of like any relationship, though.
That's exactly any relationship. That is exactly what a relationship is. A relationship is where I say, even though I can have life much more simple and much more straightforward without this relationship, I want to be needing somebody else. I want someone to need me. I want to know that I make a difference in someone else's life, and that someone else has a place in my life. I'll tell you a true story. I was talking to a young woman last week over Sukkot. I was talking to a young woman. She's in her late 20s. She's a wonderful, good, great person, and she's decided she never wants to get married. She doesn't want to get married. Her mother obviously doesn't like that idea. Her mother, it's hard to imagine this, but their mother, I don't know if she wants to get married, to have grandkids. I'm saying her mother wants her to get married. She's in her 20s, but she's a mature young woman. She's not like an idiot, I'm just like going to run around the world and go, no. Has a job, like steady and normal. She had a boyfriend that cheated on her, broke her heart very deeply. Boyfriend, and he was desperate to get her back. Spent a long time eventually getting her back, And guess what he did after he got her back? Yeah, he cheated on her again. So, I mean, not the next day, but I don't know the exact time on exactly how much time it was, but that's it. And by the way, after the second time we tried again, he still go to her house and she's done. No, now she's done with him. I mean, she's done with marriage. She's done with men. She's done. Why would I ever? That's what she said to me. Why would I ever want to be in a relationship where I'm vulnerable that this guy could cheat on me? I don't want it. I'd rather just live my life. I will never get married, and whatever. She wants to have kids, whatever. We talk about adoption, whatever. She wants to have kids, but she doesn't want to ever live through what she lived through to be vulnerable to someone else breaking her heart. It's a good argument. You know what I told her? She's crazy. She's saying it makes sense. I don't agree with it.
God does the same thing. We break his heart every day.
That's right. That's right.
He still wants a relationship.
I shared with her, with this class is exactly, I mean, I didn't tell her this whole class. Maybe I should. All of a sudden, I don't know if I should send her this video. So that I'm not giving away details that make it obvious what I'm talking about. But I forgot what to say. Oh, I'll tell you what I told her. I heard once a powerful thought about this idea from Manis Friedman. He's some good. So Manis Friedman shared that he once was traveling on a long flight to wherever he was traveling to get to speak somewhere. And next to him was another, I don't remember, Jewish, not Jewish, I don't remember anymore. And they all discussed about God and vulnerability and relationships and marriage. And they had a whole conversation. Anyway, they land. It's an international flight. They land. And what's the first thing everyone does when they land on the plane? No, everyone all Jews saying Baruch Hashem, but the first thing you do when you land is you call home. You call your mother, you call your wife. I just landed. Yeah, we're fine. And he's watching how, like, Manis calls his wife, I just landed, home, whatever, I'm in the country, I don't remember. And so he laughs because he was trying to show, he says, see, I'm a free guy. Everyone here is chained to their spouse and their mother. They have to go call their wives right away and say, I landed. I don't have anyone. I'm a free bird. Sounds good. Sounds like I'm a free bird. Freeman says to him, you're not a free bird. You're the loneliest bird on this plane. Because the fact that you have no one to call now to tell them that you landed safely is because there's no one in the world that cares if you landed safely or not. If you were to die in this plane, no one knows the difference. I don't know if I said these words, but the reason why you have no one to call is because you have no one who cares. So relationships create this need that I'm vulnerable on you, and I'm waiting for you to call me, and I can't fall asleep till I know that you're safe, and I'm vulnerable. But because I've created this vulnerability, I've now allowed a space to open up within me where you can come in, and you can love me, and I can love you. If you don't allow vulnerability, then you can never allow for the closeness, for the real care and the love that comes from that connection. So when God decided, this is what marriage is, and when God decided that I'm going to allow myself to become at the mercy of man, which is crazy to think of, because God is perfect. And yet this perfect God that doesn't need anything in the universe, who has millions and millions of angels doing everything for him, says, I don't want the angels. I don't want perfection. I don't want absolute obedience to every creation that I've created. I want the love and the relationship that comes from being in need of somebody else. And that's why God made man. It was highly risky, but that was the only time of a real relationship. And so I want to end up with the following analogy to explain this relationship and why our imperfections and why our attempts at a relationship with God are more valuable and more precious to God than all of the angels and all the perfection that God had before God decided that I want to need a relationship with man. There was also the rabbi having this conversation, but I'll just say the point. If you have two people come stand right by that door right there, and one takes a picture of this room. Okay, it's a picture. And one sits there and paints a painting of this room. So you have a picture, and everything in the picture is exactly perfect, including the little heart that you drew on your cup, right? Even now, everything is exactly right. Everything is exactly perfect. The painting is not going to be so perfect, right? It's a painting. So it might not have the crease on your jacket right. It may have the color wrong. It may have, paintings are not meant to be accurate. How much money is the picture worth?
More than the photo.
Well, the picture, the photograph.
Nothing.
Well, I'm in the picture. No, I'm just saying. So let's say they didn't get me in the angle. It was like this. Okay, I'll be honest. Even the picture with me in it, it's not worth anything, right? It's not worth anything. A good painting, if it's a good artist, is worth a lot. So why would an imperfect painting be worth almost infinitely more, hundreds of times more than a perfect photograph?
The effort.
The feeling.
You're both right. Effort, feeling. When you buy a painting, what are you really buying? The emotion in the painting, the effort in the painting, the human perspective in the painting. You're not buying a picture of a scene. If you wanted a picture of a scene, you go on, get a photograph of the scene. What you're buying is the artist. And in fact, a good artist is visible, and you can tell that's this kind of painter. That's Michelangelo's work. I don't know what I'm saying. You can tell someone's art just by looking at the art. Because a real artist actually literally invests himself into the painting he paints. He is found in the painting. He is found in the painting. And therefore, a perfect photograph of this room is worth nothing, because even though it's accurate and even though it's flawless and it's perfect, it took zero effort to make it. The person that took the picture just clicked the button. And because they put in no effort to make it, there's no value. A painting, it's not perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect. No one's looking for perfection in the painting. They're looking for the person in the painting. They're looking for the painter in the painting. When God decided to make a world, and God made angels, and God made animals, and God made all these things, every animal, every angel, everything that God created it perfect. And God created in a way that it would never disobey. It would never break the rules. It would never mess up. It would be born perfect. It would always follow its exact plan. It would never change. And after God made all these perfect photographs of all these creatures that would do so many beautiful things, then God said, now it's time for me to make something completely new. Something completely different than anything I've made until now. Now I'm going to make a painting. Now I'm going to make something that's not going to come out perfect. I know it won't be perfect, but it's going to be a real relationship. It's going to be an opportunity for me to can have a relationship where I can truly be loved and chosen by someone that doesn't naturally know me, by someone that exists in a tachtonim, in such a low, physical, concealed world where my presence is not obviously felt. And there, in that world, they're going to choose me and having a real relationship, a real marriage, and no longer is God alone. No longer will God be alone. So when we mess up, God is alone. We cheat on God, or we hurt God, and yet God forgives us, and again and again and again, because God is so eager for our love. God is so eager for that relationship, that marriage, where we give up on our pleasures. We ignore the physical part of our existence, the bodily part of our existence that we talked about earlier, and we focus on the God within us, and we find that holiness within us, and we connect to God within us. That's the greatest feeling that can exist in the world. And that's why God made man. Got it? Makes sense? Next class is next Monday night. Every Monday night at 8 p.m. is our Me in the Bible classes. The next 2 weeks we'll be doing part of the series. Next week will be Chava, Eve, and the male-female aspect of humanity. And then in the week after that, I don't remember the date offhand, will be a class on the snake and why God would create temptation. The week after that, I'll be officiating a wedding of the first bar mitzvah kid that I'm marrying. So I'll be in New York officiating a wedding, so you'll have to miss me that Monday. But it'll be for a good reason, thank God. Yeah, God willing. Okay, Laila Tov, my friends. God bless you all. Peace in the Middle East. Peace in the homeland. Am Yisrael Chai. This learning hopefully is in their merit for lots and lots and lots of blessings. God bless you all. Right? Till next Monday anyway. And if you want to join us Tuesday night, JLI, starting October 24th, the World of Kabbalah, you can sign up online, mychabadcenter.org/JLI. Again, mychabadcenter.org/JLI. It's going to be one of the JLI courses that I've ever taught. I say that without any doubt that it's going to be one of the best.